NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
Welcome to Credits Without Contacts. I'm Laura Sheely, and I am so excited to be here, to be with you. That is our little earworm, and I want you all to keep singing that we are the champions, because we are. Everybody that's watching this, everybody that's out there working hard, doing what you are doing, are the champions, and you're the champions of this world. And with that, we've got a great show. We've got a couple more champions that I'd like to introduce. First, my co-host, the child, who came to us in our last episode. So the child will be with us, and Jesse Wilson and Jackie Ford. So excited to have them. And without any further ado, Jesse Wilson and Jackie Ford, everybody. And the child. Hello, my champions.
Hello, Laura. Wow. You just made, I think, our job a lot easier with that unbelievably committed introduction. Thank you.
Is that not a great song for this crowd?
Man, it feels good.
Yeah.
To be a champion. Yeah. It feels good to be surrounded with champions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Jesse.
If you didn't have that song, you sold me. All that. It was all there. Good job.
Well, it's a hard time right now. We're all suffering the effects of COVID. Thank God that I'm healthy, my family's healthy. It appears that you guys are healthy, but on this Easter Saturday, which I'm dating the show, but on this Easter Saturday, prepping for Easter Sunday, we've got all my prayers go out to all the people in all the countries that have been affected by this horrible, horrible virus.
You bet.
And it's a sad time, but we can make it a productive time.
Yeah.
And our jobs still continue. Our jobs never quit. And with that being said, we need CLEs, and we need people to bring us some education. And so I'd like for you to talk about what presentation you guys are going to do for us today.
Well, thank you again, Laura, for having us. And Jackie, I'm looking at you. Well, this always feels like some episode of the Brady Bunch. I'm looking down at you. So, hi, everybody. I'm Jesse Wilson. I'm a communications specialist, a jury trial consultant. And Jackie, would you want to introduce who you are?
My name is Jackie Ford. I am a criminal defense lawyer. Spent 5 years in the public defender's office. My heart pumps public defender blood. And I have the privilege now of being in private practice and learning to defend folks the way I always hoped and wished I could do, with a great team and wonderful trainers all over the country. It's really a privilege to be here. And there's not a case problem or a case issue that I or someone close to me probably hasn't faced. So I love being with criminal lawyers. I think that we are a different breed, and I'm just incredibly honored to be here. And I'm grateful for Laura and for you, Jesse, for inviting me.
Well, it's great you're here, Jackie.
I appreciate you both being here.
Yeah. Well, it's great. And it's an important time, like you said. There's two sides of where we are. There's the fear, and then there's the opportunity. And what do we do with that? And what we're seeing now is so many lawyers coming out of the woodwork who really are taking the time to work on not just working up their cases, but work on themselves. And what does that mean in this world that we're talking about? Working on themselves is going synonymous with or linking up with storytelling. So that's what we're talking about here. Storytelling for trial. And we're going to be sharing with you in this in the confines of our virtual world, the power of the 4 steps inside and outside the courtroom stage. And we are emphasizing working on storytelling for trial for criminal defense attorneys in this arena. And we're going to be walking you through these powerful 4 steps of what we consider to be masterful storytelling tools to help you prepare better for your clients or prepare your clients for trial, but also B, to be able to arm your jurors for what we feel is the vital emotional connection to empower them to act. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So,
yay, that sounds wonderful.
We're going to be taking you through 3 acts. And these are the 3 acts. Boom. Act 1 is self-connection. Where are you in this story? 2, Act 2 is client connection. 3 is the jury connection. And how can we take these 4 steps and apply them to these 3 different areas? And as I'm saying this, I'm seeing baby Yoda, slowly rising. I think
He's getting excited.
Maybe that's our audience that we focus on. So, Jackie, let's let her rip.
Awesome.
Okay. So these 4 steps, what are they? A little bit about my background, my history, how I got into working with attorneys. These are plaintiffs' lawyers as well as criminal defense attorneys, and how I ended up meeting Miss Ford is, well, my background is in theater, but these tools of the stage, the real origin for me, the birth of them, when I really saw how powerful they were, came when I started working, well, for years, working with inmates, taking theater behind bars. And as I'm saying this, I want to share something with everybody here. And this is me, if you could see it over to the left in the black, working with this intense face, working with a group of inmates in Colorado. And I was doing a program called Lessons from the Stage Behind Bars. And how was I going to reach them? How was I going to meet them? How was I going to be able to help better tell their stories? That's me with this. This was actually the last group that I worked with. This was about 2 years ago. That's a really up close. Let me get a better shot here. You see this guy here? He's wearing a mask. So one of the tools that was so instrumental in helping me able to understand and tell their stories and connect with them and figure out who they really were beneath this mask was the mask. And so this segued into the work with the 4 steps. And the 4 steps draw its origins from working with another tool called the monologue. And the monologue, if we're looking at it from the perspective of the theater, if you ever watch a play or a movie, a monologue can be looked at almost like as a mini play. Within 5 to 7 minutes, you have an entire emotional journey where you take a character from road A to road B. And that's a journey. And along the way, you've got 4 steps. And 4 steps, these 4 steps are these. If I am the character stepping into this role, who am I talking to? Step number 2 is, what do I want? Step number 3 is, what gets in the way of what I want? And step number 4 is, what changes? What changes for this character? I found, going back to the work with inmates, this tool to be so powerful in getting them to be able to see who they really were beneath the mask, and what it was that was really holding them back from what they wanted. And often it was just, I want to be a great father. And, the question that I would always ask them is, if you could save a life with this story that you're about to tell, would it be worth it? And that became the impulse for them to be able to step into this new role. So I was doing this for years, and then, it was in a short amount of time. Well, there was a gap where I was like, okay, I'm so fascinated with these tools. I'm seeing that they're producing powerful changes in people. And it wasn't that long before I got a call to work with lawyers. And I met this great guy. Yeah. And I met this great guy named Mel Orchard. It said, hey, come to Trial Lawyers College and share some of this stuff. I'm like, what the hell is Trial Lawyers College? And I'm going to let Jackie talk about that. But I found that this tool, these 4 steps, were pivotal in the work that they were already doing there, which is working on self in order to understand who we were representing. And I was able to meet that world with the world that I was so familiar with, which was the world of the theater. And within less than a year, I found myself applying these techniques, these 4 steps, to all these cases I started working on. Let me figure out who this person is. And then once we take that emotional connection, then how does that translate into the courtroom? How does that then translate into empowering our jurors? So that is a brief overview of sort of the journey of where we are right now. And what Jackie and I are seeing, and we're going to be talking about this at the end of our session here. We have a group that we want to tell you about. I'll tell you about it in advance, and then we're going to come back to it. The group is called Write, Tell, Live, and Story. This is, in Jackie's words, a creative lab where we get to deep dive into the tools of powerful storytelling, because more and more lawyers we are starting to see recognize storytelling is the fundamental, most important trial skill you can master right now. As you're working your cases up, there's never been a time that I've seen that people are like, okay, now I want to go back to the fundamentals. And that's what we're talking about here from the stage. These are the tools from the stage and screen that apply so much to trial more and more. I'm starting to see that. So Jackie, let's talk a little bit about these 4 steps and how they've been useful to you. And then maybe we could start with what they do at Trial Lawyers College.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I am on faculty at the Trial Lawyers College. For those of you who don't know what that is, it is a place in Du Bois, Wyoming, founded by one of the world's most famous and well-respected lawyers, Mr. Jerry Spence. And Jerry created the college back in 1994 for a place for trial lawyers to come learn to connect on a richer, deeper level to juries when we're trying incredibly complex and emotionally distraught cases. It's easy for me to connect to what Jerry must have been going through in 1994 when he put this college together. And I will start by saying when I went to the college, I didn't even know who Jerry was. Everything I had to worry about was the 180 young men and women that I was charged with representing. And I got into a rut, and a kind of prejudgment of cases. So I'd open the file and I would see, distribution of CDS, possession of a firearm AFC, here's his 3 priors, wash, rinse, repeat. I know the voir dire I'm gonna do, I know the opening I'm gonna do, I know what's gonna happen, and I can do this, and I would do it. And I'm gonna give a little bit of credit to myself and to that mindset in which I was decently successful. Prior to going to the college, I was already winning awards for criminal defense in the state of Oklahoma because we were actively litigating every possible case we could get a jury on. What changed for me was a mentor of mine who I had long admired and adored from afar, invited me to try a very special case with him. And it was an OU professor who was wrongfully accused of molesting series of young ladies, and we were facing 10 counts of varying allegations of child molestation, the worst 3 being allegations of rape of his 13-year-old mentally disabled stepdaughter. And I couldn't imagine why David would call and ask me to try this case, but he was insistent that I was going to have to be the person who cross-examined these witnesses. He had all of his reasons, and he strongly encouraged me to go to the college. What changed for me was the way I approached jury trials. Well, I used to win cases, but my jurors left frustrated, angry, We brought heat into that courtroom, and people would leave not feeling good about their experience. And what I learned is they were going home and talking to their friends and family about that. Sometimes I could browbeat them, shame them, rage them into a verdict that was positive for me. But when they go home and tell their friends what a problem that was, if they ever have second guess or they feel like they were pressured, the only person they discredit is the defense lawyer. And then they're telling all of their friends that you can't be trusted. What changed for me with the college is learning to tell a story that is community-based, that all of us can connect to, because there is an emotional truth to every single one of our clients' stories that every juror can experience. Just real briefly, there's only about 8 human stories in the history of the world, before Christ, after Christ, and for time, centuries to come. Love, hate, trust, betrayal, hopelessness, hope, fear, courage. And these stories exist in every single one of us. And what the Trial Lawyers College really taught me is how to tap into the emotional truth of the stories that I was telling to jurors, not only so my clients could be successful in their case, but the dripping of how the criminal justice system works and how people are wronged by the government would start to be the conversation happening in the community. And I'm one of those people who likes to eat the whole steak at once, you know? So I want it all, and I want it now. And so instead of approaching jury trials as burn the courthouse down like I did before, rage and hate and frustration and just rah, although sometimes successful, it was causing damage to my future jury panels. My privilege of meeting Jesse Wilson came at a graduate level program in 2015. I had first gone through the college.
2015, wow.
It's been 5 years, Jesse.
Yeah, that's nuts. All right.
I'll never forget it, because you did the 4 steps of the monologue. We only had 1 hour with you.
That's right.
We only had 1 session with you, and you taught us the 4 steps of the monologue. And I was in a place in Oklahoma that most of you all probably know is incredibly conservative. We are the buckle of the Bible Belt. I mean, and in that program, do you remember this, Jesse?
Yes, absolutely.
I gave a speech, and at the end, people wanted me to run for president. And instead, what I did from that work in that barn in DuBois, Wyoming with you, who I'd never met before in my life, you inspired in me something that resulted in a nonprofit organization being launched in Oklahoma, and lobbyists being formed for inmates and for people in the criminal justice system for the first time in the history of our state. The 4 questions is all he coached me on. And since then, I met Jesse in a variety of ways. I go to his workshops, we work together. I've been lucky enough to have him consult on cases, but I'm really, really privileged to be here with you guys, because what he's teaching us works. It works in every conversation that I have. So we're going to talk in a very micro way about how we tell our client story today, but I want you guys with your lawyer brains to be thinking, how do these 4 steps affect me in every other avenue? Because when I make sentencing arguments to judges, I'm asking these 4 questions. When I'm asking for continuances that they don't want to give, I'm asking these 4 questions. When I'm asking a DA to consider mitigating factors, I'm asking these 4 questions. When I'm interviewing clients about why they're in my office, I'm asking these 4 questions. So these 4 questions for me represent the most effective formula for inviting a conversation that leaves the listener motivated to act. And that's, at the end of the day, what we all want. We want our jurors to do something they're not naturally inclined to do, which is to say the police screwed this up, to say we can't trust the system that allowed a case to get this far, to look at someone with tattoos on their face that say mama tried and 15 felony convictions and say, but this time he didn't do it, and let him go regardless of the fear they felt when they first watched him walk in the courtroom. And that's the magic of what's happening. We've got a lot of programs. The one I'm hook, line, and sinker invested in right now is what Jesse's teaching us, and how beautifully it works with the emotional connection that the Trial Lawyers College teaches, which is just connect to humans on those 8 stories: love and betrayal, trust, hope, all of the things. It works beautifully. So stick around and see how it works, because I'm about to let him work me over.
Absolutely. And we're gonna guide you along the path after after this call to where you can go, where you can work with us right now.
I am super excited just being a DNA analyst, you know, and a crime scene person. I'm super excited now. You've got me pumped up, Jackie.
Awesome.
Well, these are the same 4 questions I would be asking my experts on the stand, and we'll see how that looks in practice, I'm sure. But every single one of us have something we want, right, Laura?
You may want to work me over.
What do you want?
Right.
You want to find the truth.
Absolutely.
Laura's floating over the universe.
Yeah. What's standing in your way of the truth? And what is
usually the government expert.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I'm so excited. Sorry, I'll stop talking about it and we'll start.
What we're seeing here, and we geek out on this stuff, of course, but what we're seeing here are the ripple effects of these simple questions. And let's now pull it down into this right here. Let's just focus on this part right here. When I work on a case, I mean, there's a million different ways of approaching the right way of telling the story. But for me, it's all about character. I want to know immediately, who's your guy? Who is this person? And developing or putting together a story through character development for me is the approach that works. And so that's what we're going to be starting with.
Now, when you say that, Jesse, let me just act as a clarifier for our audience. When you say who's your guy, we're talking about who is your client.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Now, but you bring up a really interesting point. Now, today we're going to be focusing on, we're looking at the 4 steps from the perspective of you, the attorney, your client, and your juror connection. So those 4 steps change in our development of character. When we talk about when I said your guy, we know that there's 3 different stories. There's 3 main stories that you want to tell in trial, right? There's the villain story, there's your client story, and then there's your juror story, right? So we know that story can change. So what do we, when we talk about story, let's just focus on, for right now, who is your client? And the best way that we're going to put that over here, that's going to be our act 2. The best way that we're going to understand who that client is, to understand how the 4 steps work, what are the foundational elements of the 4 steps, and that's the monologue. So I've asked Ms. Ford to bring some material today. And if you are in our group, and the group is Write, Tell, Live in Story, and this is, again, I was saying the creative lab that is an extension of the program that I have called Tell the Winning Story. And again, the group is focused strictly on storytelling fundamentals. The very first thing we have you work with is a stage monologue. So you've got, Jackie, I want to say it's almost up to 400 now. You got about 400 attorneys in there, all working on stage monologue. They have selected pieces from a number of different sources. There's free online monologue stuff floating all over the place. People have emailed me, Jesse, give me a piece. They're finding pieces that just, they're working with text from a stage play. A monologue, if we look at it just by itself, comes from a character's deep need to say something. And anytime it is, I want to say something, in order to create the drama, because, without drama, without conflict, you've got, like I always say, Jaws without the shark, you got nowhere to go to. Without the drama, we don't have a need for that person to say something. So they have to identify these 4 steps within the limited confines of this emotional journey called the monologue. So Jackie has selected a monologue from a play called I Ate the Divorce Papers. I Ate the Divorce Papers. So briefly, Jackie, just tell us.
I think the play is actually called Goodbye, Charles, but that's my.
Oh, okay. But the name of the piece, I like the first title better. I Ate the Divorce Papers. I didn't eat my old divorce papers. I torched those bad boys. But anyway, that's a different story. But so tell us briefly, what is your monologue about?
My monologue is, my husband has presented me with divorce papers and he wants me to sign them. And instead of signing them, I ate them. Or at least I'm telling him that I ate them. And I'm telling him I ate them because this whole thing is a joke.
Mm.
And in fact, they were so tasty, they went nicely with ketchup.
Mm.
My goal of the monologue is to let him know how he has no power to make me feel bad. And that if this is a joke, we will just joke about it. My attitude seems to me to be very sarcastic and flippant. And my goal is to make him feel as small as he has made me feel.
Okay, terrific. Now let's take all that and let's compress it even more into our 4 steps. Who are you, your character, talking to?
I'm talking to my husband, Charles.
Great. Simple, playable, actionable. You're immediately in relationship with or relation with this person. Step number 2, what do you want in this scene?
I want him to know that he cannot make me feel bad.
Okay.
I want him to know that this is in fact a joke and that he cannot hurt me.
Got it. Got it. Very, here's where we always see where the kind of rubber meets the road here, where you have to give yourself something that's simple and playable. As simple and playable as I want a cup of coffee. Come on, give me a cup of coffee. And there's a many different ways how I'm going to reach that goal. But the more simple we can make for ourselves, it frees us of our ability to be not emotional, but emotionally available, which is very, very different. Okay, what gets in the way of what you want?
I want him to not know that he can hurt me. What gets in my way is that this is absolutely destroying me. And that is my internal truth, is that this is absolutely destroying me. Therefore, I'm going to do anything I can to prevent it from happening, to include eat the damn things. So what's getting in my way is my hurt and my desire for one more chance.
Okay. If I am, you say you're talking to your husband, right?
Yeah.
If I'm your husband, what am I not giving you in this scene? If this is you and me,
You're
what
not
are you not getting from me?
You're not remembering why you loved me in the first place. You're not giving me any room to try again. You're not giving me anything. All you're giving me is the divorce papers, and my sense is absolute silence.
I've shut down.
Yeah, he's done.
Okay.
He's made this decision. And I know that once he's made this decision that there's probably nothing I can ever do.
So that's one hell of an obstacle. I mean, try talking to a person who's shut down. And what is it about your character that still feels the need to speak to him? I mean, why don't you just tell him to go F off and leave? There's something that obviously has to keep you, it's something that's keeping you here. So, I'm saying all this because we've got to emotionally justify it for ourselves, right? We've got to bring ourselves into this world too. Right. Why is this person not leading? Why is she saying what she wants to say or what she needs to say? And then what is it that changes in this character in the course of this scene?
So in the end, she realizes that she doesn't want to live without him, that she ate the divorce papers because she's terrified of doing anything else, because if this is over, then everything about the stories she's been telling herself is also over. She doesn't want it to be over.
And that's the change.
Be a joke.
Yeah, it starts off as a joke.
It starts off as a joke and a desire to hurt him, but at the end, the desire is she wants one more chance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't want to hurt him. She wants to remind him of why they did this to begin with.
And I want to just pull up something here while we are. So again, can you guys see this?
Yes.
So these are the 4 steps. Who are you talking to? What do you want? What gets in the way of what you want? And what changes? So, Jackie, can we give it a shot?
The monologue?
Yeah.
Can I give you my internal dialogue?
Absolutely. And for the purposes of what we're doing here, let's, if we were in the other group, I would say you'd have to be committed to memory. Right now, let's free ourselves of the words. Our main goal is to find what you said earlier, the character's emotional truth. That's all we're interested in here. And if we got to force it, we got to, do something that's fine.
So I
But
think
this
it's
is gonna get us
important
there.
for our audience to know this too, that one of me and Jesse's commitments to today is that we're not recycling anything that we've ever done before.
Right.
We've got a whole new monologue that I've.
That was us because of technical difficulties, but we are back with Jackie and Jesse. And while we were trying to get our technical issues resolved, I'd asked the question because as a forensic scientist, I'm not as sharp as you all. Why I guess I didn't understand Jackie reading this monologue. What are we doing here? How is this helping criminal defense lawyers?
Yeah. Jackie, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. So my experience with the monologue allows me to understand the importance of the 4 questions dealing with the story that I'm not emotionally connected to. So for me, Laura, I'm one of those lawyers who some people criticize for being too emotionally connected to their clients. And so for me, if I jump straight into a case that I'm working on, and we are going to do that, but if I jump straight in, then I'm too married to the facts and the police reports and the evidentiary things because my lawyer brain is functioning. So the gift of the monologue to the lawyer is, here's a story that has characters and a message that needs to be told, much like our opening statements or our closing statements. This person is speaking from a place of a need to speak. So I can use their text to practice the steps of the monologue to see how the monologue changes based upon the creative answers that we give to Jesse's questions.
Okay, so then you're going out and Jesse had mentioned, but I guess I wasn't putting it together from my brain space as a scientist. I wasn't putting it together that there's monologues out there. When he was saying that there, Jesse send me a monologue, I wasn't connecting that. And
Sure.
so what you're doing is you're going out on the intranets and picking a monologue or going to a favorite play of yours and grabbing a monologue and then before even putting the case, before even thinking about the case and the client, to get in your headspace that you need to get to answer the 4 questions that we've talked about earlier.
And a nice analogy might be the first time that a police officer engages his gun in defense of himself or in protecting his community, he's practiced it first at the range. So the monologue is our range practice so that we can figure out how this works and why it's important. Why do we have rules? Why do we have these questions? How do they change the story? So from a practice standpoint, as lawyers, we're not doing this the very first time in front of a jury. The first time I'm presenting my monologue, my client's story or the community story, I'm doing it first in our laboratory. So the group that we're working on right now that have all these lawyers, Jesse tasked us all with going to the internet and finding a monologue, and he gave us a bunch of options to choose from that might be fun to play with. Now, I personally chose something that I'm not familiar with. I've never seen this play. I don't really know who this character is because I wanted to honor the technique of what Jesse's teaching us by saying the text is only the vessel to practice the skill. And once we get the skill physically in our bodies, then we can shift it over to our casework, where we're less connected to getting it right, or we're more connected to getting it right in the case. Over here, we're just practicing it so we can see what it's like. We're just shooting at the range.
Thank you so much. I completely understand now.
Good. That's why I had Jackie come.
I really appreciate that. So, Jackie, I'm going to give it to you.
Okay. So, Jesse,
Yes, ma'am.
make sure I understand what I'm being asked to do. You would like me to read this monologue so that the participants can understand the
I
text that
think
we're
it'd be good if they heard it cold, just so we know what we're dealing with. What's the text, and then what's the choice that we're going to make this thing come to life?
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So it's called I Ate the Divorce Papers. I ate them. That's right. I ate the divorce papers, Charles. I ate them with ketchup, and they were good. Good. You probably want me to get serious about our divorce. The thing is, you always called our marriage a joke. So let's use logic here. If A, we never had a serious marriage, then B, we can't have a serious divorce. No, we can't. The whole thing's a farce, Charles, a farce that tastes good with ketchup. I mean, wasn't it last week your dad asked you for the reason you walked down the aisle with me and you said, for the exercise? Ha ha, that's funny. You're a funny guy, Charles. I'm laughing, not crying. Ha ha. I'm laughing because you're about to give up on a woman who is infinitely lovable. For instance, Paul, he loved me since 8th grade. Sure, he's a little creepy, but he really loves me. He made me 127 passes at me, proposed 47 times. He sent me over 200 original love sonnets. See, he sees something in me, Charles, and he writes it down, a metered verse. And that's not something you just find every day. Someone who really loves everything about who you are as a person. Paul may be insane, but I value his feelings for me. I would never ask him to sign his name to a piece of paper promising to just turn off his feelings for me forever. That's what you're asking me to do for you, to sign away my right to the sweet voice, Charles, those baby brown eyes, the way your hands feel through my hair before bed. Those aren't things I want to lose. In fact, I won't lose them. I won't lose you. I'll woo you. I've written you a sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and I'm not crying. I'm laughing. It's all a big joke. It's very funny, Charles. I keep waiting for you to say April Fools. Then I'll rush into your arms. But you're not going to, are you? No, of course not. It's not April. I didn't even really write that sonnet, you know. Paul did. I think it's good. You see, the truth is, Charles, I ate the divorce papers. I ate them because I can't stomach the thought of losing you.
Got it. Thank you, Jackie. Now let's just make sure we're on the same page. Let's go through the 4 steps again. Who is this character talking to?
She's talking to her husband, Charles.
What do you want? You, the character?
I want him to believe that he can't hurt me.
And what gets in the way of what you want?
That I'm reeling in pain.
And what changes?
That I let go of some of the armor of the jokes and the sarcasm and the naggy, bitchy part of me.
Okay.
And I get real and tell him that I can't thought of shutting it down.
Okay. So in every story, there's always 2 stories. And in the 8 fundamentals, we talk about this a lot between the surface story versus the beneath the surface story. So let's look a little bit deeper into the story, and let's look at what I call the crossroad. And the crossroad is where we see the change, the choice. It's often a character who has a choice. Sometimes they don't have choices, but usually we come to a point where the character makes that choice. And that is where the height of drama That is where you pull your audience in at that peak moment where that character makes a choice. That is the rope between you and your audience. And we're going to be talking about that in Act 3 in our jury connection. In the crossroad of this character, we make our decisions based upon two main drivers emotionally. There's the pain, and then there's the pleasure. We make decisions to avoid pain to gain more pleasure, and or for some people it's vice versa. But whatever that is, there's always those two forces that's going on, and we see that in the beneath the surface story of the monologue. So let's look at this character's crossroad. If we can put it down, and we'll start with the words, where, well, this is her pain, this is her pain, this is her resistance. We want to take all that down and put it into our anchor word. One word for what I call the old story, and one word for what I call the new story, the pain state, the pleasure state. So let's drill down on this character. What's her name?
I'm not sure I know her name, but I call her.
You call her what?
She's Emily. It's Emily.
Emily. Perfect. Emily. What is Emily's crossroad? And an example of the crossroad is, from fear to faith, from rage to acceptance, from disgust to joy, right? So her internal truth.
She goes from disgust to humble. I get the sense that there's probably some from blaming to accepting responsibility. From strong to vulnerable.
Okay, and this isn't like, you've written it in stone and that's it. The beautiful thing, and this is, if you can get yourself in a space to do that, and I try to do that as much as we can when we are in actual witness preparation, when we're working up a case. Jackie, we do this all the time. Before we start storyboarding, sequencing, lining up our witnesses, who the F is this freaking character? And the crossroad gets you there, because the crossroad is now an essential tool that you're going to bring to your jurors. But we're not there yet. Okay. So this can change. So her journey then is from what to what?
From cold to warm, from armored to vulnerable.
Okay. All right. Let's go with armored to vulnerable. And the reason why the one word is so important is because what that does is activates my emotional state. You hear me say this all the time. Let's focus on the state before the story. Most of us got the cart before the horse. Most of it just give me the script, just give me the words, and hopefully the words will do the work. As much as I love the language, it's never about the words. It's what's underneath the words that make the words, give the words the power. It's what the choice that the storyteller is making. This is why we start with storyteller. Where are you in this story to make you got to make it real for you.
Right.
I call it the most important juror. And who's that? That's you, right? So when we say these words, when we say armored, that has a real that has energy to it. That has life to it. And now that gives you a real journey from armored to what? To,
I think we said vulnerable or humble. Vulnerable, not armored.
And whatever that, yeah, not armored.
I think I said vulnerable is what I said. I didn't write it down.
So vulnerable, open, and that has a different emotional state to it. So we have one hell of a journey within a very, very limited amount of space. If you can do this here in this space, imagine what you can do in the courtroom, where you're also working in a very limited space, in a world where how can I say what I can't say? Not easy to do. This is our training ground. If we can do it with a stage monologue, it's going to be a lot easier to figure out who your client needs to be for them. So let's let her rip. We've identified our 4 steps. We've identified our crossroads. And if you know what your step 4 is, then that becomes a gravitational pull to pull you into the narrative of the monologue. That's going to affect your timing. That's going to affect your pacing. That's going to affect your body language, because you've got a journey. Give it a shot, Jackie.
Okay. So I am Emily. You know what, Charles? I ate the divorce papers. I ate them with ketchup, by the way, and they were tasty. You know how I love ketchup. I'm not interested in the divorce papers for any other reason than this little snack, because you know what? This is a joke, Charles. You're a joke. This marriage is a joke. And if our marriage is a joke, then the divorce has to be a joke. So what do you want from me? You know, your dad asked you why you walked down the aisle with me anyway. What did you say? For the exercise. Funny guy, aren't you, Charles? You know, I've been loved before. Paul has loved me since 8th grade. He has proposed to me 47 times. He may be insane. He may be obsessive, but at least he knows what it means to show the way he cares about me, and the way he cares about me matters to me, Charles. It matters. And this is a joke. It's a joke because it's always been a joke, and it's always going to be a joke. So you know what? I ate the divorce papers, and they tasted real good. You know, Paul used to write a sonnet for me. He cared enough in his insanity to put his feelings down on paper.
Okay, and just stay there, stay connected there. You don't have to answer this, but just think about step number 3. What's getting in the way as I'm trying to pursue my goal? And internally, it's not working, is it? I'm not getting what I want. He's shut down.
Yeah. He's completely shut down.
He's completely shut down. So this approach, this clearly isn't working. So work through the struggle and see where that takes you to 4. Continue. You're doing great.
You know, even in his insanity, he was able to identify his feelings and put them on paper. You know, for you. I wrote you a sonnet. I'll read it for you. As I look at thee in the summer's light, the smile on your face, making my day bright. As I look to thee, my love is sure. You know, it's not. I didn't even write that, Charles. Paul wrote that. And I thought it was beautiful. He would never give me something and just ask me to shut off my feelings for him. You're asking me to forget that I love your big brown eyes. You're asking me to flip a switch and not be excited to tell you about my day. You're asking me to forget. It's not a joke. I'm not crying. I'm laughing because the thought of that is more than I can stand. I can't imagine flipping that switch. And I can't sign the divorce papers. I ate them because I can't imagine my life without you.
Okay, good, good. And we can play with this and I think we were talking earlier that we can make this character on the surface really ditzy at first, and all of a sudden the mask off and it's like, whoa, that was just a mask. And we can play with all sorts of styles, and we can all play with all sorts of different kind of voices and tones. But really, at the core of, this is the core of who she is, isn't it? We're seeing her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's doing her no good.
And it's doing her no good at all. So does this support the 4 steps? Did we see who you're talking to? What do you want? What gets in the way? Did we see the change? And the change in the theater as well as in the courtroom, we know this, and I say this all the time, is that big is small and small is big. Sometimes when I say, what is the change, people think, well, because this is the theater, we're going for a big Hollywood happy ending. No, the littlest thing conveys volumes. And the jury and our audience, same with the theater, same with the courtroom, they are, what did we say yesterday? They are the microscopes of truth. They see things so up close that when you are connected to story, the tiniest little gesture, the inflection of your voice, the body language, the things you're saying and not saying, we feel. And that's what we're doing with the monologue. So
I think if I can, one of the things that was hardest for me when I first started doing this work is the change. My lawyer brain, Jesse, interpreted that the change was the solution. What was the change? Did she get what she wanted? It took me a long time to kind of process that the change may just be an internal change. It may be an active change, but it may not be that you get what you want.
No, that's right. That's right. Absolutely.
And I want to solve it for her, right?
Yeah.
I want to solve it for her, but I do not, in any version of how I've thought about this, in that moment, I kept waiting for him to turn back to me, and he doesn't.
Change is not always a positive. Change is a change. And maybe even just the attempt at the change is something that's different. What this also does as a storyteller is that it allows us to shift our state within a very short amount of time. A lot of the times, it's a go-to for everybody. Emotionally, we sort of stay along this plane, and what we end up doing is we flatline. And for our listeners, we switch off. Right? A lot of the times what I hear is, Jesse, and I'm sure Jackie, you've heard this too, people who go to the workshops. I'm not an emotional person. I'm not, my trial team says, I got to be more emotional. My clients say it. I'm not an emotional person. I'm saying, great, you don't have to be. Well, what do you mean? I said, it's not about being emotional. It's about being emotionally available. And these are two very, very different things. When we talk about state management, when we talk about state before story, you've got to know what you've got to work with here, right? You've got to be able to make choices. So,
well, and it's really a cheat to our clients, Jesse, for us to say, I can't do this because I'm not an emotional person. Right. Well, that's not acceptable, because you owe it to your client and to the jury to tap into all of our resources. And I'm not asking anybody to get in and fake tears. I don't think this character would break down in tears. Maybe another person's version of her would. That's right. But we don't have to be emotionally wrecked to be emotionally available. And the refusal to do it is a betrayal to our clients. And it is denying the jury of a moment.
That's right.
To connect manner in which they are motivated to act, because facts don't motivate anybody to do anything.
No, they do not. That's right.
Their emotional response to the facts and their emotional response to the story is what motivates them. And if you refuse to give them an emotional connection, then the only thing they're going to be connected to is the government's emotional need to punish.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And when we truly understand who our characters are, who our clients are, and we trust their story, what do we say, Jackie? We don't have to give it away so cheaply. We don't have to push the emotion. It works for us. Some of the greatest storytellers I've seen started out, oh gosh, this guy, he's a freaking corpse. When in the theater, an expression that I love is, don't just do something, stand there. You can do so much within your stillness if you're trusting the story, because that truth comes through you. That's what's so powerful about this work, is that you don't have to be an actor, right, to do it. And
the freeing ourselves of solving the problem leaves the jury with something to do.
That's
so
right.
If our client and Emily is accused of murdering Charles, and this monologue, this speech that was recorded by a nanny cam is all of a sudden being presented to a jury. I mean, this is a real life situation. What was going on with her at the time? Intent and in our emotional state is everything in criminal cases. It's everything.
That's right.
And what if it wasn't recorded, but we know the speech was had because he told his friends about it. And that's, part of the evidence that the government's putting forward is her losing her mind over eating the papers and trying to show that as some sort of malicious intent. And in fact, That might be one way to look at it, but
Right.
it could also be the way where that was her moment of just accepting that it was over.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. And again, to go back to the why of why working with the stage monologue, because, and this is approach that makes sense to me, is that if I understand who this character is, I'm going to have a much better understanding about how to structure my whole play. Right? How am I going to put this together? Who do I need? Who are my cast of characters?
Who are the witnesses we could call to show Emily as a vulnerable person, as opposed to cold-hearted, icy, sarcastic, nagging bitch that the government wants, excuse my language, Laura, that the government wants to present to show that she's malicious. So we have to be able to show someone that can show her vulnerability and show her at her softest, which is, please, please, please don't let me not ever look into your eyes again. Right?
So I think that's a perfect segue into our act 2.
And let me just interrupt and say that I've given warnings for all of these episodes. These are for criminal defense lawyers, and there's going to be vaping, there's going to be swearing. Unless I get bored, there's probably not going to be any nudity.
What?
But I know.
That's act 4, Laura.
Now you tell me.
I don't want to give them everything, right?
That's right.
I've got the
Don't
eye
give away
candy
the secret.
already. But so feel free to use the expressions that you want to use.
Thanks.
These are not for the faint of heart.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you. So Jackie, let's move into act 2. Client connection. We've explored the monologue from a safe distance, safe enough. Of course, we have to still take ourselves along the way, but a stage character is a stage character. Here's where the rubber meets the road. And this is where I always see the resistance. Can we have the same kind of freedom and sense of play and curiosity and about the people who we're representing? Who do I need to be for them? How do they being our jurors, need to see them through other people? And so, Jackie, if you could talk a little bit about how the 4 steps have been helpful for you in working with your clients in pre-trial, in our preparation, and then boom, into trial.
Sure. So because I'm completely obsessive about things that I love, the 4 steps are something that I love. So I am not joking around when I say I apply them to nearly every conversation that I have. Whether it is picking up the phone and talking to the police. So I'll give you some real life examples. In the midst of this COVID crisis, I have a client who's being alleged to have committed child abuse. The action is caught on video, but you don't see before, you don't see after. The decision was made that she was going to speak to the police this week. Before we started, I started with Madison, my client, and said, who are we talking to? Talking to the Oklahoma City Police Department. Who is that? Well, he's a guy who's in the business of charging people and putting them in prison. He's looking to put me in prison. She's answering the questions that I'm asking. What do you want, Madison? I want him to understand that what you see on the video isn't the whole story, and that my intention wasn't to cause anybody any harm, and that this has all been blown out of proportion. What's standing in your way? And she says, well, he's seen the video. It's been all over the news and everybody's, piling on. So the support is to throw me in prison. So he's already prejudged me. That's what's standing in my way. What's the change? At the end of this conversation, Madison, what do you want him to be left with? An understanding that I'm a good babysitter, that I love those kids, that my intention wasn't bad. I want him to see me for who I am and not just who's in the video. Cool. Let's do that. And that's the story that we told. And it is a calming practice for the client too, because they feel now empowered. I ask clients that come in on intakes, why are you here? Of all the lawyers in Oklahoma City, why'd you come to Jackie Ford's office? They're going to give my answer. Why are, who are they talking to? What do you want from me? and they're going to give me my answer, and what's going to stand in our way? You know, maybe it's evidence, maybe it's story, maybe it's our prior record. We have this conversation. Then I take it to the DAs, and who is this DA? And the language that we oftentimes use that we're going to hear some more of probably is reversing roles. It's a very intimate act to reverse roles with somebody. And I don't just mean like, you don't know somebody till you've walked a mile in their shoes, but I mean, have you really actually walked a mile in their shoes and felt their shoes on your feet and the body aches and pains? What does it mean to reverse roles? And I reverse roles with my DAs, and I don't give them a cliched version of who they are. My prejudgment of who they are is not reversing roles. They're human beings with hopes and dreams, with families, with love, with betrayal, with all of those things. And who am I talking to? And the way I create my presentation is 100% based upon the very first step, which is who am I talking to? I have to reverse roles with that person. What do I need as that person? I reverse roles and ask the same questions. Who am I talking to? I'm talking to Jackie Ford. What do I feel about her? She's scary. She's really loud. She's pushy. She makes me feel all kinds of ways. What am I going to do? I'm going to put up my armor and make sure she doesn't get to me. What is standing in my way of her getting to me is me being protective. What is the thing I fear about her most? You know, and so I figure out what is going on with them to then create the story I want to tell, because the story I tell to DA A is not the same story I'm going to tell to DA B. I do it in sentencings. And once we get into a jury trial, we prepare our witnesses with these 4 questions. Who are we talking to? The community, right? So there's all kinds of different layers of the story that gets kind of complicated, and I don't want to freak everybody out, but we practice with the monologue and practice with the monologue and practice with the monologue so that we understand how monologue method works, so that when we're doing it in our real life, it's not fake. We're not acting. We understand our goal. So I do it from opening statements to direct or cross-examination to direct examination of my clients, who I'm putting on. And I do my closing. There are portions of my closing arguments that I specifically give to specific jurors. I don't just talk to all of them all the time. If I'm talking about a mother's love, I'm looking at this woman who I've communicated with in voir dire and talking about a mother's love. When I'm doing my kumbaya, I'm finding my war veterans. Why is the burden so high? Because people have died for it, not died for it to be lessened. And so I give my kumbaya to my veterans because I know what they're motivated to do, because I've done the work in voir dire for them to tell me what motivates them. Mm-hmm. So now I know who to give my message to. And it's no longer about giving it to 12 strangers. If you're giving a closing argument to 12 people who you perceive as strangers, then I would submit to you that you need to practice reversing roles and getting to know them through that entire process, watching their nonverbal communication, watching how they're receiving traumatic information. They are not strangers. And if you're at the end of the jury trial still perceiving them as strangers, then you need to work on how you can better emotionally connect, which is why the college is really important, because you just do it for nothing, day after day after day after day, reverse roles, reverse roles, reverse roles, so that it just becomes a natural thing. It's not acting. And I know we're not to that point of saying like what is tell the winning story and what is that you teach, but I want to say it to people at this point, because that looked like a little bit of like acting coaching. This is not acting. This is empowering ourselves to be more real and to act less.
That's right.
I think that's all I have on the preachy part of that, Jesse.
Well, I love it. Thank you. And you're absolutely right. I would just piggyback a little of what you just said, is that your conversation, your step one with your jurors, it never ends. That is the conversation you're having the entire time. You're connected with them from beginning to end through everybody else. Mm-hmm. You've never stopped talking to them.
That's right.
Right?
And
because you've identified
to their emotional truths.
That's right. That's right. So let's apply the 4 steps then to client.
Okay.
If you're okay with it, Jackie, we were talking earlier this morning about a case that you're working on. And we can change the name if you're comfortable with that, or use his actual name.
It's public record. It's okay.
Let's talk about Stephen.
Okay.
And let's go there. Let's do an exercise that I like, that we like, that is helpful for us, that they do a lot of at TLC. And it's funny, before TLC, I was working with theater teachers that when we got into the role of the director, when we got into the role of the character, the director would say, give me an I am, Jesse. Give me an I am. I am Hamlet.
Right.
I'm Macbeth. I'm Larry. I'm Jessica. I am as your character, because that forces you immediately to make a strong emotional connection, right? You can run, but you can't hide. It's hard to play an intellectual idea. You got to connect. Great communication is a physical experience. It's hard to do this exercise and not feel it in your body.
Right.
So, Jackie, give me an I am on Stephen.
Okay. Stephen. Whew. I am Stephen Sherman. I am charged with murder. I am a loving husband, a grateful husband. And the thing that I love more than anything in this world is my daughter, Trinity. And the role of being her dad is bigger and more important to me than any role I've ever had, to include being a minor league baseball star, having the opportunity to go pro. I turned that opportunity down to be her dad the way I wanted to be, available to her the way I wish my dad had been for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Let's take the monologue, or the framework of the monologue. Let's take this now through the lens of the 4 steps. And if we were to create a monologue using this person, your client, as the character, in order to find out her emotional truth, to connect to her emotional truth, who is she talking to? And I say that right now, and I want to just preface this by saying, again, if our target is to find her emotional truth, you can do what's called surplus reality and make up the backstory if it's necessary for you to get to who she needs to be. On the other hand, you might find a piece here that you absolutely can use and can tell the jury. So just be on the lookout for that.
I want to make sure I'm tracking you, because one of the concerns that I always have as a criminal defense lawyer is I'm not sure my client's ever going to mount the stand. And in fact, I'm a believer that if I can avoid it, I do.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Stephen's ever going to get there. So I think we have some options we can choose, and I want to do the thing you're asking me to do. Do you want me to work with Stephen, or do you want me to work with a witness I know is going to mount the stand to tell the Stephen story?
I'm glad you asked that question. Whoever you want that's going to get me an understanding of who Stephen is. And I feel it's not Stephen.
So the alpha in this relationship and the person that I, as the lawyer, Jackie, am most connected to in this story is Katie, his wife.
Okay.
Every interaction I have goes through Katie, and then Stephen's secondary. That's just kind of the way things are. But Katie is the representative of the Sherman family that I am confident will mount the stand so that we can do work that will be real. And
Good.
this is
so I want to time out here, because this is a really important point. And this comes up all the time when we do casework, when we're now not dealing with the staged monologue anymore. We're dealing with the real flesh and blood person. If I'm already thinking about the best way that I can to capture this guy's emotional truth, I don't want to see him. I want to see the wife. Right? What am I doing here? I'm already lining up how I'm structuring my whole case. Right? We're going to find out way more about him through her. Right? So continue.
So give you some I am from Katie's perspective.
Yeah. We know who he is. Let's hear her. Yeah.
I am Katie Sherman. I am married to Stephen, and we have a beautiful daughter, Trinity. And Trinity is the most important thing in me and Stephen's life. There was a time probably when Trinity took more of my attention. Looking back now, listen, none of us are perfect, okay? But I probably let go of my marriage relationship for longer than I should by focusing all my attention on Trinity. And the only thing that brought me back was this crazy thing that happened to Stephen. And as awful as this whole experience has been, and our life has been turned upside down, Stephen was a sole provider for this family. Okay. I had a side job that gave me mad money, but I got to stay home and raise our daughter. She didn't have to go to kindergarten, or she didn't have to go to daycare. She didn't have to do any of those things because she got to be at home with me, and I loved it. And Stephen worked his ass off to make sure that that happened.
Okay, good. Now you're revealing something more about Stephen. Let's go to his crossroad.
So,
pain, pleasure, old story, new story.
When I first met Stephen, we were in college, and he was on the baseball team, and he was the it boy. You have never seen anybody more handsome than my husband. And I remember thinking he was way too wild for me. They were always out and about, and they would drink and they would do all of these things. But what made Stephen different is when it was just us, he let me see a part of him that nobody else ever got to see. He was really open with me about his faith and how his faith caused him conflict in the kind of person he was and the kind of person he wanted to be. We made a choice to raise our daughter strongly rooted in Christian faith. We go to church. We are actively involved in our community. And one of the things that I do is I limit Stephen doing things that he otherwise likes to do. And I think I'm right in doing that. And I think there was a good reason for doing that, because had Stephen listened to me, we wouldn't even be in this position. But I also don't want you to think anything bad of him. He's not a drunk. He doesn't have an alcohol problem. But we don't drink in this house. And I know that when he goes away on business, that he breaks that rule. And he did it in this case. And that's why he's here. Because he decided to go out and drink, and he decided to go to a bar and play games instead of going to bed like a reasonable human being would. You know, and I tell him all the time, no good things happen after 10 o'clock. There's no reason you need to be outside of your home at 10 o'clock. Nothing but bad things happen then. But that's what he did. And he went out and he had drinks, and now this accident has happened. And I'm here to tell you, there was a moment when I wasn't sure he was going to get to stay in this house anymore. Because whether he caused this death or not, had he not been out drinking, had he not betrayed me in that way, none of this would have happened. So he bears some responsibility. And we go to a lot of therapy to make sure that I can manage not breaking up our marriage. Because I'm not gonna commit it to him. But I'm angry, even now.
So that's your step 3, isn't it? What's getting in the way of what you want? You're angry? You're hurt?
Part of me
You're
that
betrayed?
blames.
What could change for this character? Is it just the fact that she's still deciding to just stick it out with him?
So Katie wants validation. She wants justification for standing by her man. She wants the system to acknowledge that they got this wrong and that he isn't what everybody, even many of their close family and friends, still carry a lot of judgment against him for drinking and being involved in an accident that caused somebody's death. I mean, at the end of the day, there's nobody who's going to celebrate that choice. So, but Katie is convinced that the story that the government is telling is not the truthful story. Even if you don't she can simultaneously be mad at Stephen and be frustrated with him for betraying her and for drinking when he shouldn't have, but not have to accept that he caused this person's death and to accept the government's narrative. Her real anger and rage right now is at the government. She let go of that with Stephen when we were able to prove to her that the things that he had told her was true. So now she believes that he is righteous, and what she wants, her anger now is so government based that what Katie really, really wants is to be free of that anger so that she can go back believing in the American dream and believing in all good things and having faith again in her God, who she also feels betrayed her. And she wants validation. And the only way she's going to get validation is with a dismissal or an acquittal.
Okay. But let's bring it down back to her relationship with Stephen. She's hurt by him, but does she want to stay with him?
She does.
She does.
She loves him more than anything, and she
There we
knows
go.
at the end of the day that he is
At the end of the
best
day.
father that Trinity could ever ask for,
Okay.
and that he will spend his life making up for this mistake. She knows that.
Important we know who these characters are in our story. If I am looking at her from a juror's perspective, how do I want to feel about what is her role? What is his role? And let's go back to his crossroad again, and then we'll segue into, into Act 3. His crossroad, one word for old story, one word for new story. You said it earlier today.
From shame to pride.
And what is the pride?
Pride in being a good father and being somebody his family can be proud of.
Yeah.
And the shame is the shame of just of betraying his family and drinking and this thing happened.
He's a great dad, isn't he?
He is perhaps one of the best I've ever seen.
And he screwed up.
Big time.
Okay. But his why, the thing that drives him the most, and this is why it hurts so much, is because his why is to be a great dad.
Better
And
than
so-
to be a baseball player.
So this is the beautiful thing. The crossroad doesn't just stay with the character. The crossroad comes out of another character. If we know who this person is, we can see that revealed through his wife.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
feel that.
Yeah.
We feel that. So her anger and all the stuff that's out here, and I want to, I'm angry at this guy. We're gonna feel so much more anger towards the injustice of this whole thing through what she knows to be true about him. He's a great dad.
Yeah. He's an incredible dad. And he has
Great
not
dad.
allowed to break him.
And let her own it, and let's embrace. We had talked about one of my favorite expressions. It ain't from the stage, it's from the Navy SEALs. Embrace the suck, right? When we embrace, we become even more powerful. She's hurt by him. She's betrayed by him. But is it a game changer? Hell no. He's a great dad.
Yeah.
And they're going to work through this stuff
Yeah.
because he's a great dad. So, if we understand that, if we've got that, see, we got to be able to cast them in the right role in order to cast them in the right role, because these themes, shame, these themes of what was the opposite of shame? What was his crossroad from shame to
Pride.
Pride. These are the themes that you tap into with your jurors.
That's right. And because we've done the crossroads work on Stephen, whether or not he mounts the stand or not, we know that theme is going to be there. So
Bingo.
what are we fordiring the jury about?
Bingo.
Where they've made choices that ultimately landed them on shame.
Bingo.
For the choices they made that landed them on pride. And
Bingo.
what was
This is how we approach putting together the case through story and character understanding. Every
So
great
the theme isn't alcohol is bad.
Tell me more. What
The theme of our trial isn't that DUIs aren't that bad. Like I work with lawyers, like, what is the theme?
Oh, okay.
You know, it's a DUI case. Well, it's not a DUI case. It's a family case, right? What is the theme? And for me, the richer theme story is the storied story, not the, and maybe other lawyers don't do it, man. But when I was at the public defender's office, my friends would say, what kind of case is this? And I'd say, oh, it's it's a domestic, he said, she said, bitch had it coming kind of thing. Oh, it's a wrong place, wrong time on a drug deal gone bad. Oh,
Absolutely.
it's a blah, blah. And we can tagline it, but that's not the theme of our case. The theme of our case is under the tagline, what's the emotional story that we're telling, so that the jury can tell it, and then we can tell it, and then the government, it's reinforced with them through each witness that mounts the stand, the story of shame and pride.
That's it.
The story of the time you did something you wish you could have done better. Because in this case, it's mirrored all the time.
That's it.
Another PLC
Right.
language, the mirror's always at work. Our police officers in this case will have traveled a different journey from pride to shame.
That's it. That's
So when the
exactly-
jury gets it, the law enforcement will be sitting in the shame chair. We'll be sitting in the pride chair when they make their judgment.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And you can call it whatever you want. Blobbity cuckoo poo, DUI, but for you, the storyteller, your theme has got to be a human theme
Yeah.
that you connect to, but more importantly, you get us to connect to,
You connect it because it's true every time, right?
because it's true every time.
Every father wants to be a great father. Every wife wants him to honor his obligations.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So, using the 4 steps for our jurors, how has it helped you? What have you used?
Man, so I do the 4 steps in every stage. I think I've said that a couple of times. What I do is when we're workshopping the case, I make a list of my cast of characters, and that's what it's called, cast of characters, and I organize them to tell the defendant's story. The government's witnesses are on the government story, and then I have my middle ground people who I will crossbreed.
Mhm.
And I love to crossbreed with government witnesses. So witnesses that would otherwise be deemed kind of throwaway or non-important witnesses.
Yeah.
They're just the CSI guy. The CSI guy who does nothing other than take pictures and then get them all introduced is
Mhm.
one of my favorite witnesses, because we know some things about the CSI guy, about who he was when he decided to go to CSI school, about what it means to be in that role, who his commitment is to. He gets to judge police work because he is an expert. So he gets to talk about what you would expect to see in a case like this. And he gets to cast this big kind of important role of the way the case should have been investigated. And then when confronted with where all the things are missing, their own brethren start criticizing their work. If nothing other than to just say, yes, had they done X, Y, and Z, we would have a much richer picture of what's going on. So I'm always in story with every single witness, and I try to take non-meaningful witnesses and make them some of my most powerful, because they're not biased, presumptively. I do it with pictures. I mean, I don't want to get too nerdy on you, but when I look at a picture that a police officer has taken, he took that picture for a reason. What's the story he's trying to tell?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What is not being said in this picture, right? So like the interview with the police that we did earlier this week, they have a video of a nanny cam with no audio. You can kind of read her mouth for what she's saying, but what is not in this video?
Yeah.
What can I tell them if I take my director's lens and go from zoomed way in to come out, and we can see what happened before and after and what was going on and all of the back noise?
Yeah.
So we do all of this work ahead of time in doing our storyboarding so that we can identify the themes and then start answering the questions of what do we need to voir dire about. I can't voir dire everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pick the things that are the most important, and I want to be able to pick the things that I know are universally true, the emotional truths that we can't get out of. You know, one of the lessons that I've learned from doing this work with you, Jesse, is that the jurors that I used to think I wanted to strike because some lawyer told me you never want these people on your jury, I just scratch all of that. I just no longer
all the time. Yeah.
I do not prejudge teachers. I do not prejudge smart people. When I have a technical case that's all about government not doing the rules,
Why would I not want a really smart person on my stand? Why? Because we think that they're naturally racist and punishing? I just don't think it's true. They may punish our clients, but they're going to punish the government too for not making their job easy. Like, come on, man. I just wanted to come in and mail this in for you. What's so hard? You're just checking boxes. You didn't put any gumption into this. Why did you not do a better job? And so they get frustrated because the system that they believe they live in, which is accurate and thorough and reliable, isn't. So when I get rid of my prejudgment of the characters that are going to be judging my clients, then I can just get to the truthful story that I know exists. And what do we know about storytelling, Jesse? All stories begin and have the same formula. Once upon a time and every day.
Yeah.
Until one day, and then something happens.
Yeah.
Then there's some tension where our protagonist has to deal with things and figure out who it is that they want to be. So once upon a time and every day, this is the history of our family relationships, the history of police and why they exist. Whatever the history is, we're telling through every witness. Once upon a time until one day, something happens. And this change energetically, this physical change, this phone call change, whatever it is that changes, becomes the springboard for our protagonist's choice point. And it's a long struggle oftentimes. And every story we've ever heard and every movie we've ever seen follows the same path. And then at some point they make a decision. And this is your crossroads.
Yeah.
Who am I? And who am I going to be in the future? Because who I am today is not who I was yesterday. And so now I have this choice point to make. So once upon a time, every day until one day, struggle, choice point. And now what? And at the end of that story, the now what? Now that I made the choice, that's the beginning of the jury story.
That's right.
And so the jury storyline, we just superimpose back on top of the other storyline. Once upon a day, these 13 people didn't know and have never been to a courtroom before. This is the way they believed, and all their legal knowledge was from Law and Order and CSI and all that shit. Until one day, they received a jury summons, and now they had to sit in the hot seat and see these stories unfold, and they have to struggle until they make a choice. Yeah. And they get to decide how this story ends. And the thing that I had to let go of, the thing that was hardest for me as a lawyer, especially a public defender who prided herself, Jesse, man, I fundamentally believed I was the last line of defense. And that if I left anything on that table, that I was doing my clients a disservice, to the point that, I've flopped around on the floor, I've cried, I've had people assault me in court. Like, I've gone all in as much as I can to not leave anything on the table for these folks. But what I finally learned is if I slaughter every Goliath, then I'm leaving nothing for my jury to do. If I am the hero to my client and I have destroyed every piece of evidence that walked up on the mountain that stand or was presented, and I have just left a bloodbath of tears and pain, then what is my jury supposed to do? Because if they're sitting there at the end of my battle and all they see is the government laying dead and slaughtered all over the place, they only have something to do with me and the client. So I need to leave something for them to do. I have to give the jury room to solve this problem.
Absolutely.
Only way I do it is for not solving it for them.
That's right.
But the crossroads that you teach. And it's changed everything about how I interact with everybody in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you to go back to the power of choice and showing the power of choice and talking about choice with your jurors when you are in trial, and in this case, I think it's obviously more relevant, it's your case, is what happens when we don't have a choice?
Right.
What happens when that choice is taken from us?
In Stephen's case, he didn't have the choice for the police to lose all the evidence that supported innocence.
That's right.
He didn't have the choice for the other person that plowed into him head on, going the wrong way, regardless of whether or not he'd been drinking.
Yeah.
And how did he engage after that?
Yeah.
And I tell Stephen all the time, you have every right to have lost your mind, picked up a drinking problem, left your wife, be an absolute train wreck, and that would be 100% justifiable behavior for what's happened to him.
Yeah.
So something different.
Yeah.
And it was choices that he made to not fall apart and the choices he made to stay strong and stay courageous that will ultimately free him, because that's who we want to cheer for. We want to cheer for the person who doesn't crumble under the pressure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think if we can end with, when we are now we're in our, we're with our Act 3, our juror connection, is that if we go back to what we did in Act 2, working with the client, to identify what the crossroads is for Stephen through his wife. Shame to vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm. So the from Stephen is really, he went from being the sole provider to this family.
Yeah.
And their gender roles were clearly identified, right? He was the stay-at-home mom, he was the financial provider, to a complete and total switch. And he is % reliant on Katie to do the things, and his embracing of that role with his children. How he is with Trinity now is they're closer than they ever would have been.
Got it. But if we start with shame, and then we end up with over here, we've got a real journey. So let's take that crossroad connection and let's have it be our jurors. Let's just give a kind of a snapshot or just a vision of what a voir dire with our jurors could look like if we start having a conversation about shame.
So the hot seat is such a fun thing.
And the point that I'm getting at here, just so we're clear, because we've talked about a lot of stuff here, is that just understanding who your character is not enough. Okay, your character being your client. That's a great start. Obviously, you've got to know who they are. But ultimately, remember, the main dialogue you want to be having the entire time is with your jurors. Right. I'm looking at this guy, but I'm thinking about me, right? What choice do I make in the face of shame? How do I deal with shame? And how can this be an opportunity for me to become a better man? Right?
So the way I think I'm tracking with you, Jesse, the way I would deal with that, because shame is an underlying emotion that I connect to in a lot of my criminal cases.
Yes.
And so we have to get there, and it's really just hard to just jump straight to shame, just like it's hard to jump straight to courage, right? So I try to find a story that we can all relate to that has shame associated. And then connecting it to our case, right? So in this case, one of the things we learn at the trial lawyers college is to invite strangers to share with you deep, intimate, personal parts of their story. You must first be willing to share intimate, personal parts of your story.
Yeah.
It's the give and take, right?
Absolutely.
And
sure.
so I have to show a point in my life where I have made choices that don't make me proud. So I would find that a theme in this case that we'll be talking about is alcohol. So I can take alcohol and talk about addiction. Part of my voir dire might look like this. I don't know very many people in this world who haven't been affected by addiction in a variety of ways. Children, parents. What happens is jurors start doing what Jesse's doing now. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe ourselves. And there was a time when I was 18 years old where I too struggled with addiction. And in the throes of my addiction to methamphetamine, I did things that don't make me proud. I sold myself short, and I caused harm to other people because I was crazy and my brain didn't allow me to make good choices. I'm not making excuses, but in the throes of addiction, I've caused harm to others. I wonder if I'm alone.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to start seeing then is very, very slowly, and I have to be willing to sit there with not a single hand. See if anybody who's willing to raise their hand to say, in the throes of addiction or under the influence, I've made choices that I'm not proud of. Now, I'm not necessarily going to invite people to tell me every story they've ever told, but I'm going to see that.
Absolutely. And Jackie, I'm so glad that you gave that example. It's perfect because, and we're going faster. I think a lot of the misinterpretation is if we're going to have a conversation about shame, some people might say, some lawyers might say, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about shame. Oh, good luck in getting any buy-in there. What you've just done in your example is that you're giving me shame the entire time and you never even said those words. That's what's happening underneath the surface. And eventually you're going to touch upon that word. And here's also, we talked about being in role reversal. As you're in connection with your jurors, you're in role reversal with your client, who we've identified the crossroads with. If shame is their cross to bear and their struggle out of shame or with shame to the other side, the opposite, and there's always an opposite, and the choices along the way, then the question that you want to ask yourself when you're on voir dire is, does this advance the story of my client and increase my connection with our jurors? Because if it doesn't advance the story of who they are and who they need to be for them, then get rid of it.
Right. And so, but Jackie, now what? Now what do we do? Because we're all stuck in shame. So then we sort out all of the shame questions through voir dire. And what is my lawyer brain learning while this is happening? Number one, I'm identifying people who will connect to either in strong resistance towards any drugs or alcohol, because people are going to respond, shame on you. Oh my God, I can't believe you would say that. Or they'll start on each other. We will start hearing where the spectrum is of how people feel about alcohol. What we'll also learn from what's not being said is who has no the hell idea what I'm talking about and needs to find shame in another way. And so just because you can't find shame in addiction, then I'll have a transition out of the addiction conversation into, and if I'm real honest, it wasn't always meth that made me do horrible things. Sometimes I did it out of jealousy. And then there would be a conversation about that. And then we would shift it from what is in between shame and pride. And we would talk about times in their lives where they made the hard choice that they are proud of today. Because now we're honoring them for being vulnerable. Now you get to be the hero. Because everybody wants to be the hero of their own story. Nobody wants to be the villain. Nobody wants to be the drug addict. Nobody wants to be the person causing harm. But if I'm going to reward you with the gift of pride and honor and dignity, if you'll sit and shit with me for a little bit in shame. Well, why is that important? Because pride and honor and dignity cannot exist without having overcome a little bit of shame. Now, I don't have to have therapy with all 30 of these people to know it to be true. I know it from my therapy, right? It's hard to tap into pride without having overcome something. And so every witness I'm going to talk about shame and pride with, to the point where the jury's going to know the next cop that mounts the stand is about to have to tell us a shame story, or Miss Ford's not going to let him off the hook. Because all of us can be ashamed of not doing a good job. In this case, they did a shitty job and they've lost a lot of evidence. So if any one of them mounts the stand and says they're not ashamed that their agency didn't do better than they did at preserving evidence, then fine, don't be ashamed. That's cool with me too, So shame is going to be a theme. And how long do we have to stay in it? And how long does Stephen have to stay in it?
That's right.
Because he drank and made a bad choice that one night. These folks have been making bad choices for 3 years before it gets to the jury.
Yeah.
So each witness is going to have a theme of that. And it's not just all going to be shame. There's lots of other stories too. We're going to tell the father and the spouse story, the betrayal, the doing the thing that your wife doesn't want you to do. We're going to tell all of those expectations, and we set those standards in voir dire. I set the community standard in voir dire in every single case with the question of who am I and what do I want from my neighbors, and test the government's evidence towards that theory all the time. Because for me, and I think I said this at the beginning, the thing I'm most interested in, of course I want justice for my client, okay? Of course I want them to be acquitted, or I want them to have mercy, whatever the thing might be. But I like to eat the whole steak. And more importantly than this one client, I want every one of these jurors to leave the courtroom and go back into their community and have a different conversation with what their experience with a criminal defense lawyer was like. a different conversation of what their experience in the criminal justice system was like. So when they walk home, sending my client home, knowing there's a dead person whose victim's family have hired a lawyer and are fighting us at every turn and will be in the front row every single day, boo-hooing and doing their thing. That even in the light of all of that, that we came to the table with elegance and grace and class and pride and honored where we were supposed to be ashamed of ourselves and redeemed ourselves in real life right in front of that jury. And we have modeled for them the behavior that we want from everybody else. If they can walk out of that courtroom and say, man, I don't remember that lawyer's name, Jackie something, but she was nothing like what I expected her to be. You guys wouldn't believe it. Now we are dripping into the community a different conversation about our system. What if they go out there and say, I had no idea that the Oklahoma Highway Patrol fraudulently put people in prison all the time. Did you guys know that they destroy evidence and that they only give defense lawyers the evidence to convict them? And that I was able to hear a prosecutor say that today? They do it. They cheat. It's not a conspiracy. Now they're telling everybody, and the future jurors are coming to the table less prejudicial against us and more open to an enjoyable experience that is a human one. You know, I have people walking out of jury trials, victims of child molestation, who have voted in favor of acquittal with tears running down their face, that come to me afterwards and hug me around the neck and say, thank you for handling that young lady's story with such grace. I thought I was going to hate you when this show was over. And now I know that she's okay because you took such good care of her, that we were able to free your client when none of us wanted to, because they felt the truthfulness of what was happening. Because in every witness and every communication, the question was asked, who am I talking to? What do I want? What's standing in my way? What is the change? And how can I magnify that change in a sterile institutional environment that is not designed to do this? And we do it only through story.
Lori, can you see why I brought Jackie on?
Absolutely.
Thank you,
That's
Jackie.
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
I want to, my cat's joined us now.
Hey, buddy.
Hi, Kitty.
She likes to get in on the show. Could you take us through, I don't want to overtake your guys' time, but I'm fascinated, and I'm excited about what you guys are doing, and the passion that I feel from coming from both of you is just incredible. And can you take me through, Jackie, what you would do for a forensic scientist? Because I see that that's very, very different than, I mean, how do you know who they are? I mean, I know who a lot of them are, unfortunately, or fortunately, but do you know what I'm saying? I think that's a little bit harder because we're not necessarily the real people. We're different than other witnesses.
You are. You're science nerd.
I'd be happy to jump in on that too, but go for it, Jackie.
Is that okay, Jesse? Can I hijack this for a moment so we can
hijacking anything? You're adding to the conversation. I think this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we can really, really test the 4 steps. I think it's a great question. So let's put it to the fire.
So what I'm going to ask you to do is set a scene for me of who is this forensic expert. Are they pro us or against us? Who are they, and what is it that they're going to say?
Well, I think the most help would be against us. And I don't want to say us. I mean, I still work for the prosecution, not near as much. Let me get my microphone down. Not near as much as I used to, obviously, when I was state police or city police. Most of my clients now are defense lawyers. But let's take it from where most defense lawyers have to go, and that is first they should have an expert on their team if there's forensics involved.
Love of all that is good and holy. Get an
yes. Just get one. But let's deal with what they're dealing with is a government expert. Let's do a government DNA expert on, let's do a sexual assault.
Okay, so would you honor me with being enrolled as my government witness?
Absolutely.
And if you would, just give me a minute or two of the story you're going to tell on direct examination to bolster whatever the government's theory is, so I can have an understanding of who you're presenting as, and then I'll be able to challenge you a little.
Well, let's do a little bit of the report. The bottom line is that I performed DNA and serology. I did a non-specific presumptive test for the presence of seminal fluid. That came back positive. I did not identify any spermatozoa, but I did find your client's DNA in the vaginal vault.
Okay. And for me to have a little insight, so holding that space for this is our expert witness. In role as the lawyer, what am I the most worried about, Laura, with this witness? What are they going to say that's going to hurt my case the most?
That your client's DNA is in the vaginal vault of the alleged victim, and it should not be there.
Okay. And so as the lawyer,
we have no claims of consensual sex. They live together. As let's say they live together, or they have reason to be in each other's apartment.
And is my defense of my person just that you can't prove it, or that it was consent from a lawyer's standpoint? What story am I telling?
The client says he did not do anything.
Okay. So that what I might start with is, and Jesse can kind of work with me if you'd like, when I think about this witness, I'm going to reverse roles once with the CSI guy, right? And you know, what do I know about a CSI person? So I can prejudge a couple of things. Number one, science matters. Number two, it matters so much that I work for the government, which is a pretty cush kind of gig. I know what's expected of me. I kind of come in at regular hours. There's not a whole lot of risk in this role. I don't have to, unlike my private investigator friends, I don't have to hustle and get people to choose me. I'm what you get, and I have built-in credibility because I'm the government's expert.
So you've got a lot of pride, a lot of ego.
That's right. And I want to be part of this cool kids club, because if I don't do well for this prosecutor right now, then they're not going to like me as much. And the detectives I know are going to talk about me, and I've heard them talk about some of my colleagues before, some good, some bad, and I really want them to talk well about me, right? And so sometimes with this position, I probably say more than I necessarily need to say, and try to hold myself out to be a little bit more important in the process than necessary, because the mere finding of seminal fluids doesn't really mean anything, but I want it to feel to the jury like it means a lot. Does that feel true to you?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on.
Okay. And there's part of me at the end of the day, I know I'm not a detective, but these detectives couldn't do this job without me. So I kind of take some ownership in these convictions, even though I shouldn't.
Yep.
And my internal conflict from science to bias, that's part of my problem, because I shouldn't care who wins or loses.
Absolutely.
What have we just done there? What did you see there, Laura? Did you see the 4 steps?
I saw that Jackie really knows the forensic scientist better than I would have imagined. Not saying anything bad towards you, Jackie. It's just that I think that everything that you described was really spot on. And so, who are they? I think you hit that nail on the head. As far as the 4 steps, where I didn't see the 4 steps is change.
So what do I want?
Well, and
you want to be a cool kid, right?
I It's me. I want to be the shit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so simple. I love that. You want to be the shit, and that's a real emotional state, right? Okay, great. What gets in the way of that? What's
What
the
gets in the
struggle
way is
to get being the shit?
and-
I mean, Jackie's gonna be an issue for me.
Okay.
The defense questions, the cross-examination questions will get in the way, perhaps.
But even before you mount the stand, we want to be the shit, but what we know about ourselves is we're never going to be the detective.
Right.
We're never going to be the one that gets all the glory. We're just going to be the science nerd. And the fact of the matter is, even if they believe everything I say, that doesn't mean he goes to prison. So I'm really not the shit. That's my truth.
That's your conflict.
Okay.
So how then, knowing that I'm never going to be shit, what is my change? And your change is going to be, I guarantee you, that you bolster science that you shouldn't bolster, that you say things as certainty that should not necessarily be certain. And then on cross-examination, the way I'm going to deal with you is going to be a lot based upon how you are presenting on direct. So I'm going to watch you do all of that. I'm going to watch you oversell the science where it was unnecessary and give me an opportunity to come at you where you shouldn't have, because if you didn't oversell it, then I wouldn't have anything to talk to you about. So what I'm going to do is start out with, Miss Laura, when you first decided to go into whatever your field is, right? Pathology. What was your goal when you first walked into school? Is this what you imagined? And I'm going to freak everybody the fuck out because I'm not going to ask you a single leading question. I'm going to ask you a story about yourself. I'm going to ask you why you decided to go into this field, why it was important to you, how you perceived this field, who were your heroes, why were they your heroes, what did they do that made them heroic? We're going to go through all of that. And then I'm going to talk about what ultimately landed you at the state agency. And Oklahoma, because I'm an Oklahoma girl, Oklahoma science labs do not have the best reputation in the world, do they?
And what Jackie is then doing is casting you in the right role.
And then it must put a lot of pressure on you to be able to meet the government's needs and not fall victim to the things that Joyce Gilchrist fell victim to, if they know who this person is, right?
Are you not going to get objections right and left doing that?
What's the objection? Let's
Relevance?
try it. A witness's credibility is always relevant, Judge.
Yeah, but why she chose to be at the police department that she chose to be at?
It goes towards her bias, Judge. If why you went to go to do that job doesn't matter, then why did they spend 20 minutes doing your CV? And that's how they're never they just spent 15 minutes going through her CV, Judge. It was obviously relevant enough to be asked. They've been given the documentation. I just want to know why she went to, state college as opposed to Harvard. I think it's a valid question since her credibility is always an issue. If we've got an
objection. As a juror, I'm pissed off. I want to know about this person.
Let them object. I'll tell you something. When you are committed to your story, when you have a story and a theme that is universally true, that is going to connect to a juror, I invite objections. Laura, I tried a murder case in December of 2016, maybe 2018. You can look it up. The kid's name was Vidal Wright Jr. One day, I drew 186 objections.
Holy shit.
186 objections. My jury coach, who wasn't Jesse in that case, but another wonderful jury consultant, had said to me, Jackie, your job is to be the Weeble Wobble doll. Do you remember Weeble Wobble?
Oh, yeah.
Weeble Wobbles, don't
but
fall
you
down.
don't fall down.
And I could not fight him back. Right. So nobody can out-argue me in objections. I teach evidence. I'm a maniac about them. My old story, Jackie, is I'm a junkyard dog, and that was my nickname, was Junkyard Jackie. So my job, my coaching is to let go of junkyard. She doesn't come out unless necessary, and rarely is a junkyard ever necessary. But instead,
now you've heard me say that one.
Yes, never, ever, ever let an objection jack with you. And when you do this role reversal stuff, and we practice this at the ranch, so for the folks who are thinking about, but this feels weird, you want to object and give me challenges, come on. I will invite you for 3 weeks to come challenge me, because what I'm going to do is reverse you into a role as a juror, set the scene, and watch the prosecution interrupt a truthful story about human beliefs and emotions and why you went to college. It is absolutely damn well relevant. And if it starts getting sustained, I just keep asking the questions. And then I've become more creative in asking the questions. It's hard to role play that without hearing the objections, but the objections is, it's absolutely relevant. If her CV and her history isn't relevant, then why is she here? That's the only reason she's here.
I like that. And I totally get that.
And so I'll paint you an alternative universe too, Laura. So, and at the end of the day, I may never question you on your report. The whole thing might be, and you knew that in order for Mr. Jones to be convicted, that we have to find semen in her vaginal whatever, right? And the answer is yes. And had you not found it, they wouldn't have been able to bring these charges, would they?
Well, then I would say, I don't know, I don't charge.
That's right. That's okay. Who does know? We'll ask them next, right? So when they say, I don't know or whatever, that's okay. But certainly you would be, if there wasn't semen in her vagina, that would affect how this jury should view the evidence in this case. True?
Well, and I set it up so that we don't know, because it was a non-specific presumptive test, so we can't even be sure that there was seminal fluid there. But how do we address, or do you address, that his DNA is in her vaginal vault?
So because we're dealing with a hypothetical case, it's hard for me, but I will have worked out.
Sure,
my goal is that I would have worked out and figured out how it got there. So I do child molestation rape cases almost 75% of my practice. And I am a firm believer, I teach this all around the country. There are only 2 defenses to these allegations. The first one was, it wasn't me, which is almost unheard of because false allegations don't come towards strangers. They come towards someone we have a beef with. So the second and most common defense is, it wasn't molestation, or it wasn't rape. And if it wasn't, then what was it? And that's my job. And that's what I tell my clients in the initial meeting. If you did not do this thing, then what happened that got this allegation to come here? Because false allegations of child molestation do not fall out of the sky. They fall out of jealous ex-wives. They fall out of crazy manipulative moms. They fall out of drug
divorce.
Addiction. They come out of divorce and a need to power and control. They come from all kinds of reasons, and we have to figure out what that reason is. And that story will stand on its own. And my forensic scientist has nothing to do with that story, so I'm not committed to it. But with this witness, but what I'm committed to with this witness is telling the truthful story of everything else. So if my story is shame, it might sound something like this. So if Detective Jones had come in and said, did it test presumptively or not? You know how he would have felt if you told him no. Right? And what is your answer? Yeah, he would have felt what?
You would have been upset.
Yeah. And having the detectives upset with us does not make for a very productive work environment, does it?
Right.
I'm never going to ask you to fucking say you're lying. I'm never going to ask you to do the thing. Everybody's waiting for the final question where I cut your head off, because that's what Junkyard Jackie would do. But what I'm saying to you about the power of this story and Jesse's method is, if I don't, in fact, cut your head off, the jury is going to appreciate me for that, because they don't need to see that bloodbath. It doesn't move their needle. They're already disregarding everything that you say, and me not fighting with you is buying their time and honoring their intelligence. And they will take your head off in jury deliberation rooms.
That's it. When you trust the story, you trust your jurors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I've had the opportunity working with a lot of lawyers throughout the country on different cases for the last 25 plus years, even though I'm only 12, is that I've been able to talk to juries after whether there's been an acquittal or whether there's been a conviction. I've been able to talk to the jury, and then there's even been studies on it. Is that the jury does not like anybody to attack. The jury does not anybody. The studies have been directed towards the defense or towards the prosecution. Is the jury does not like the prosecution to attack the defense expert witnesses, even down to the point, how much do you get paid? Those questions the prosecution constantly asks, and the jury hates it.
They do. And you know why? I think there are lots of reasons to why. But one of my theories of why juries don't like it, us amping up anger and rage in a courtroom from either side, is because they're caged. So this whole presentation started with Jesse showing us these young men in prison. What is a jury trial for these 12 strangers, but for their very own 6x12 cell that they have to live in 8 hours a day, 5 days? If I'm trying a case, I've never done one in less than 5 days, 5 days at least at a time. They're told when they can eat, when they can go to the bathroom, what time they have to be here, what they can wear, who they can talk to. They're told where they have to sit. Jurors are ripped of all of their own personal autonomy and put in a 6x12 foot cell.
And their liberties have been taken away.
Their liberties have been taken away. And what is happening with every single thing that we do is drawing up emotions. So what Jesse's talking about is we don't say, and you're ashamed of yourself, aren't you? No, who cares? Nobody needs to see me shaking my finger. What we do instead is show the shame. What we do is show the fear. What we do is show the crossroads and the choice. The emotions are real. We don't have to say them, because when we're judging other people's emotions, we're going to get them wrong all the time. How many times?
The most powerful words are the words you never have to say. One of the exercises we do once we get in the monologue in our spine is to do the monologue. You ready for this, Laura?
I'm ready. Hit me.
Non-verbally.
In silence.
In complete and total silence. Now, there's two parts of that exercise. The first part, the attorney typically will do something that looks like charades. I got to make it really, really, but what if we already know the story, right? Then the second part of the exercise is finding the gesture, finding that, and it can be just as simple as just a fist closing or sitting in a chair or smiling. Whatever that is, find the gesture that conveys the change in this character in order, again, to find the truth of who they are. Now come back to the words. And the most powerful words are the words you never, ever have to say.
Right.
And you don't have to fight for them. You don't have to push for them. You trust them in us, your audience. That's the power of what we're talking about.
And if you don't have to say the words, then your words are never wrong.
That's it.
How many times have you been in a fight with someone you care about and you say, I'm sorry that you're angry with me? And they go, I'm not angry. Right?
Right.
Well, clearly the hell you are, but that's not the way they're perceiving themselves. They're frustrated. They feel betrayed. They feel unheard. They feel whatever. So they're not labeling their feeling as angry. One of the biggest ways to disconnect yourself from the jury is misjudging what's going on with them and them having to correct you. Mm-hmm. So you only misjudge it if you're trying to label them. Instead, what if it sounds like, I imagine there's a lot of shame in knowing, Stephen, that had you not taken that first drink, none of us would ever be here tonight. True?
True.
Right? So, and he might say, well, I wouldn't call it shame, but certainly embarrassment. Yeah. I imagine it might feel. And then I invite them to judge my imagination of the feeling and correct it, as opposed to me saying, you must have been ashamed of yourself. No, I wasn't ashamed of myself. It's not like I'm an alcoholic. What's the big deal? I just had a couple of drinks. It wasn't my fault I got roofied.
Yeah.
So why do I need
to
judge?
Let them struggle with it. Let them say, well, I wouldn't call it shame. I call it embarrassment. I call it, I don't care what you say. It's shame.
Right.
You don't grill him on that. We know that. We feel that. And his struggle reveals the struggle even more.
And then it's a universally truthful story. And the lawyer who's not judging what's happening, but is showing what is happening isn't manipulating anything. Like my resistance to starting to work with quote unquote actors, my resistance to the Trial Lawyers College and to Jesse's thing in the beginning was, I don't want to fake it.
Yeah.
I don't want to fake it. I don't want to be an actor. It is not acting. What it is learning to become more real by putting your own fears and your own anxieties and your marriage to the script. Like if I reverse roles with people who are watching me do the monologue the second time, I screwed that all up. I screwed up language and kind of the orders of things. I think I missed some stuff, but did it matter? Because the words aren't really what matters. It's what she's feeling when she's saying the words that matter. And that's what matters in jury selection as well. I'm always looking for what isn't being said, not only in voir dire, but from my witnesses, and especially a government witness who's hostile against me, I know is coming to the table armed. Girl, I know what they say about me. They don't all hate me. I got some friends over there, you know? And I know that there's this idea that I'm going to trick them. I'm going to box them in a corner. And so they come in fully armed. And there is not an objectionable question on cross-examination that's not leading. Like I get away with it because I don't ask leading questions, but it's because I only know what the answers are. The answers are emotionally truthful answers. And if you're not emotionally truthful, then I'll take your lie because the jury's going to discredit you because we all know you're bullshitting. So now, when I'm doing my regular lawyer stuff, that's not to say that I don't ask leading questions, because if I have a point to make, if I have an evidentiary thing I'm trying to do, I'm not taking my lawyer skills away and replacing them with storytelling skills. I'm taking my lawyer skills and blending them with my storytelling skills so that my objections matter. Perhaps the prosecution's doing something that's objectionable, but does it affect what it is that I'm trying to do here? Is his behavior actually asking objectionable questions, telling the story I want to be told, which is oftentimes that the government is bullies and they make people say things that they don't want to see and they drive people into testimony that may not be accurate? If that's what they're doing, then let them do it. I'm not going to object unless what is happening is affecting the story I'm trying to tell and the emotional connection to this jury. And every witness is going to start the same way. Jesse came and tried a case with me 2 years ago that was big time, high profile teacher child molestation case. And every single witness had to talk about what their roles were. And why was that? Because we started jury selection with identifying our roles. I walked up, hi y'all, I'm Jackie Ford. I want to talk to you about the different roles we all play. And before I ask you guys, I'll model for you. I'm a lawyer. I'm a teacher. I'm an aunt and a daughter and a sister and a friend and a lover. I'm a plumber when I need to be. I love going fishing. I'm a hiker. So I identify all these different things. I am statements. And then I invited the jurors to start doing the same. And we talked about the roles that we play. And in those roles, sometimes you get a different version of Jackie. My sweet little nieces and nephews at 3 and 6 years old do not get lawyer Jackie. You know, they don't get teacher Jackie. They get fun, playful Aunt Jackie. So we talk about all these roles in voir dire. People are like, what the hell does anything have to do with anything? Girl, every witness had to identify their role, and it started just like we're talking about with you. So when you would have mounted the stand, I would have said, Laura, before we get started, every witness has been asked the following 3 questions. So I don't want you to be left out. What is your role here today? And what are the core values of the Bureau of Investigation?
I was just going to say, and then you want to hook it into the values.
Right, because so we did roles in the voir dire, then we did core values in the voir dire.
Yeah.
So we standards,
and
everybody. And so then they would set their core values, and then they would testify however they were going to be. And if any part of their story that they were telling didn't honor the values they just swore under oath that they upheld, then we dealt with that. And how
what's interesting about the value question too is where have those values been tested? You know, it's one thing to say that integrity is important for me. It's one thing to say that trust is important for me, that loyalty, that love, that faith, whatever those, and of course, you know, the values you want to be able to hook into your story, the values of your client. But the values tested are interesting because, you know, you see the struggle, and that's, you know, you can go to shame, you know, out of shame grew, vulnerability. Out of shame grew being a parent, commitment. These are things that I didn't grow up with. Well, why not? Tell me more about them, Mr. Jones. Well, you know, I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father didn't know the first thing about loyalty, and it was abusive. And so what I'm hearing you say, Mr. Jones, is that your choice to become a great father was in opposition of what you grew up with. Yeah, I didn't want to be my dad. Thank you, sir. So now we have a real great example of a value that's been tested. And the choices along the way. And you
so
could have easily gone down that road, right? But you didn't. Why? Well, because I never wanted to become like my father. Great. Right. And then we can hear that again, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
So they get to talk as a community what they do. And for Dyers, I have my jurors make a commitment. Before we sit down, there are a set of values that have been listed that we are all going to hold everybody accountable to in this trial.
Yeah.
And those values are values created by them, for them, and they agreed to them. And if they don't agree to them, we cross them off. It's either a community agreement that we're going to engage this way or we're not. And so here's the core values,
right.
And that's the evidence against those values.
And then the values, you can go from roles to values, and then ultimately to principles. What are we talking about here?
Well, this has been fabulous. You know, I have a very good friend of mine who's an excellent attorney, but he's not confident, and he always says to me, I think he's got a little crush on Jerry Spence. He has read everything. He's been to the trial lawyer group out there, and he wants to be Jerry as opposed to being him. And on LinkedIn and various Facebook and all these social medias, there's a little meme thing that says, you know, don't be somebody else. You have to be who you are. And what I see that you both just presented is that you are giving any lawyer, right, the ability to be who they are and add this new way of thinking and processing and dealing with your cases.
Well said. Well said. And I would venture to say that Jerry, if I were to role reverse with Jerry, and I'm not going to imitate Jerry, there's other people who do that much better than I do, would say, be your own Jerry.
Yeah,
find your own Jerry. What's the single most important thing in the courtroom? And that is credibility. We all know that. And so when you trust the story, you know the story. You're living the story. It's in your spine. And you trust that I'm going to know that story. That is incredibly powerful, because what we resist persists. And if we're in there fighting, filled with fear, that's what they're seeing. That becomes the narrative.
And I would dovetail on that to say that I do know Jerry. I would never want to speak for Jerry either. But I know Jerry well enough to know that what Jerry would say to that is, that's because you're prejudging me for being a better man than I am. Don't want to be me. I have made mistakes. I have hurt folks. I have done things that I wish that I couldn't do. And in fact, as Jerry Spence teaches every single lawyer that walks into that college, the number one rule about being successful in his environment is to be 100% real. And Jerry says it all begins with you. And everything that Jerry teaches through the psychodramatic techniques, that's for another day, is all about connecting to you, your soul, your child's soul, all of your feelings, your hopes and your dreams, your the times you've been the hero, the times you've been the villain, every single one of the stories that you have lived are valuable and meaningful and rich to be used in this role of lawyers to better tell our client stories. We must be authentically 100% ourselves, which means we have to wrestle with our shame and we have to wrestle with our pain. And we have to be able to, like, I came out of the college, I was perfectly fine talking about the awful things that I had done. I mean, that's just kind of part of who I am. But I was not great at talking about the wonderful things that I had done. I wasn't great at being able to tell myself the story of being a good person and a loving person and a good teacher and a valuable member of the community. My story is a much uglier story that I tell myself about worthiness. And so Jerry would say that it all begins with you, and learning your story first is the key to being the best storyteller for your client, which is why it's important to start with the monologue, because the story I'm creating for the monologue is one that exists in me. Mm. If Jesse were to do the Emily monologue, Emily's crosswords are going to be very different. Who she is, what she wants, and what the change is likely to be very different, because through Jesse's director's eyes, he can only tell a story for her that is true for him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, and
that story because it's true for me.
And liking or loving yourself, your own personal story, I feel, is a byproduct. And just as an aside, and I know we need to wrap this up pretty soon, to go back to what I started with, you know, working with inmates, what I all hear all the time, man, I get these thugs coming up to me saying, man, thank God, Jesse, you're not telling me to love or like myself. Thank God this is not one of those programs that you're telling me to go look in the mirror and say, you're a good man and I love you. That ends up happening as a byproduct of the work. But what I hear all the time is, but I get to tell somebody else's story. I get to be able to have the freedom to be able to step into the shoes, whether that's my victim or whether that's just a made-up character that I'm working with in a monologue, and be able to breathe humanity in who they need to be. And why is that? Because when it comes to trial, and when it comes to telling our clients' stories, and when it comes to our jury connection, stepping into the role of another has nothing to do with you. It's entirely about their story, but it has everything to do with you to make it all about them. So there's an interesting paradox, right? And liking or loving yourself, we all want that for everybody else, for everybody. That may come as a byproduct. I just want to know what I'm working with here, man.
Right.
I want to know what I'm working here with.
My client home.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
That's what I want. I want to be able to connect to whatever story, shame, pride, love, hope, betrayal, whatever it is that allows my client to go home to be with his family and not spend another night in filth.
That's right. That's
good
right.
enough for me.
That's right. Okay.
Practice it as at write, tell, and live in story. I'm so excited. I want to go check out what they're doing today because I'm so inspired doing all of this work. But it's a practice thing. It's going to be weird for folks who just see this, Laura. They're going to be like, what? It takes a minute to process what they've seen. But I'm telling you, the only way you master the skill is to get into story. You just have to get into it and take risks and have fun and play and imagine and create and put all of our lawyer brain stuff aside. I mean, if COVID-19 has given us nothing, it has given us a universal pause.
Yeah.
And in this universal pause, where for me, I'm sometimes powerless to do other things, I can be in story, I can play, I can create, and I can work this muscle, which will ultimately benefit my clients when this crisis is over in a much richer way because I would have not had time to do it before.
So tell me, Jackie, what, for all of the people viewing this, what's their next step?
Man, I would invite, and I don't know if I think Jesse would say the same, but I would invite them to come to Facebook to write, tell, and live in story for this reason. Some of the finest lawyers I have ever had the privilege of working with are engaged in this case. I'm not going to drop names. You just have to know that the top trucking lawyer, the top med mal lawyers, people who have run for Congress, people who are actively engaged in changing the conversation in our community are on this page, not promoting themselves. You're not going to know who the magicians are, because every single one of them has stepped into this role, just like Jesse has invited us to be 100% creative and real. So join the page. What you're going to learn to do is do a video, some artistic thing of where you are, you, the lawyer, where am I? What's going on with me? And then we're going to start working with monologues, and we're going to start playing with stuff, telling stories, and you're going to see other lawyers doing it. Lawyers who
Pretty
are
incredible what's going on right now.
rock stars.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. And other people that have worked with Jesse for so long and who have connections to the college and other great programs, because for those of us who are story nerds and trial nerds, there's just not a program you shouldn't try, you know?
So what is the Facebook page?
It's called Write, Tell, and Live in Story.
Write, Tell, and Live in Story, and that is
Actually,
the
no,
name of the
it's just Write, Tell, Live in Story. That's
Write,
it.
Tell, Live in Story.
Correct. It's a Facebook group that is that I created. Well, you know, it's funny how, like what Jackie said, the COVID-19 was the catalyst, but it was something that I've been wanting to do for a while. So in my program, Tell the Winning Story, there is, you know, a place where you can go to really stretch pull the slingshot back and look at the fundamentals of storytelling, which have always been in a sort of a more limited capacity in the other workshops that I do. Here's an opportunity to really get into the guts of that. So that was created, about 2 weeks ago, and I think we're already at about 400, where people are coming in, rolling up their sleeves and getting serious about this art and science of storytelling.
It's really fun and exciting.
Yeah, it is.
You, Jesse, have also put out a DVD series. Is that correct?
So this is a video series, a CLE series that was released from Trial Guides this year. And I mentioned Mel Orchard earlier. Mel Orchard and I, we are co-teaching together in a series called The 8 Fundamentals of Breakthrough Communication from the Stage and Screen. Jackie Ford is in a lot of those. We shot it over a 3-day. She's in a lot of the videos, just being amazing.
So
Jackie. So much fun. We shot it over a 3-day period in a black box theater in LA. My brother and who's a video filmmaker, brilliant guy with his team. We filmed this stuff, and then we chopped them up and edited it, and then Trial Guides has released it, and so it's getting a lot of attention, and it's a perfect bridge into the Write, Tell, Live Your Story group, because again, if you watch the videos, you're getting foundational stuff. It's like it's preparatory to work for the actor to get on stage. It's getting stuff that most lawyers really have not been exposed to. Everybody talks about, well, story is important, but why is that? So the videos go through that, and then it's like, well, like anything else, how do I put it into practice? Well, here we go. So, the Tell the Winning Story, we're going to have, hopefully after this thing is not going to last forever. We're doing a lot of virtual stuff right now, but we still have our workshops, we still have our seminars, all the stuff that we're doing. But the Creative Lab, what's happening right now, and I cannot recommend it enough, is Write, Tell, Live, and Story. It's
on Facebook.
On Facebook. Yeah.
Now, if I want to pick up the newly released DVDs, where would I go and do that?
So go to trialguides.com. So they're not DVDs.
No, I apologize.
Yeah, it's a video series that you download. Bam, it's right there on your laptop, your computer, phone, all that stuff. It's a CLE video series. Go to trialguides.com. The name of the series is Tell the Winning Story, the 8 Fundamentals of Breakthrough Communication from the Stage and Screen, with Mel Orchard and myself. And
Jackie Ford.
Yeah, well, Jackie Ford. There's a lot of other lawyers who were in this workshop, but Jackie Ford plays a pivotal role in a lot of the videos. So
I'm just so excited to get to play in your sandbox. And Jesse's good about doing this, but when this is over, I would strongly encourage folks to come pick up a weekend and come play with him in one of his Tell the Winning Story workshops. So what you're going to see in the breakthrough videos from the trial guides is us actually doing the 3-day workshop. It is not staged. It is real lawyers working on real cases in real life. And there's nothing that we can teach you with screens in between us that is going to replace the art of standing on a stage and doing this in real life. So once that opportunity is available, don't miss it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, I can't thank
Well,
you guys.
That's our.
That was the advertisement, and I think everybody for spending time and doing this CLE, Contact Without Credit. I certainly like to point everybody back to where my presenters are, and Jackie Ford, criminal defense lawyer in Oklahoma City, and your office is it Jackie Ford LLC PC?
You can find me at fordlawokc.com. Got a website that's being relaunched sometime in the next couple of weeks. It'll have new, fresh stuff, but it's there now. And yeah, there's contact information for me. If somebody just wants to riff cases, listen, I love doing it. So my cell phone number is easily findable on Facebook. Connect with me on Facebook. My name is spelled funny, JACQUI. Ford, and you'll be able to find me there, and I'm happy to riff and brainstorm case ideas and just kind of see what we're up to. We're always up to finding some new fun way to train and create with lawyers how to be the best trial lawyer they can be.
Well, I thank you both. I'm going to start getting in touch with my inner child, which is obviously very difficult for me. So I'm going to go through these difficult steps. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I feel that I need it. So I'm going to take the child and try to get in contact with my inner child. But I'd like to thank Jesse and Jackie for this wonderful presentation today. And I'd like to thank Gerald Lippert with the NACDL, who is putting all of these together to get out to everybody. And I'd really like to thank our viewers that are downloading these and getting these and listening and having to deal with my eccentricities and my music selection. But I just really want to say thank you for downloading these. Thank you for being the champions that you all are. And please, please be safe out there. Wash your hands. And we'll get through this. So thank you all.